It's a Sunday morning Joe and Joe weather show where we are a week before Christmas. And the week ahead shows a major storm that's going to impact a very large portion of the country in one form or another. So we will be talking about that, do a little bit of long range, and who knows what other subject matters we will be discussing on this Sunday. So hold on to your seats, folks, or hold on to your sleds, depending on where you are, and we'll get into it. Brought to you by Omni True Value Hardware at 1226 North Wellwood Avenue in West Babylon, New York, in southwest Suffolk County on Long Island, Long Island's largest rock salt source, should the time come that you would need it. Also, all the great snow and ice melt products like Mag Ice Pellets and Flakes, Pellido, and of course, if you want a new snowblower or two under your Christmas tree or any other supplies to get you through this winter, head over to Omni 631-756-1125 for the best prices in town, and the website is
OmniTrueValue.com.
That it is, Mr. Rayo. So I wanted to ask you, first of all, a good morning,
Good morning.
to you. And let me just get the screen fixed up here so we can be side by side. Good morning to everybody on the chat board. Welcome to the Joe and Joe Weather Show. Just want to say we've picked up a lot of new subscribers to the Joe and Joe Weather Show over the last couple of weeks, and that's wonderful. Make the weather family a little bit bigger every day. So thank you for joining us. If you'd like to subscribe, just hit the little old subscribe button there on YouTube and use your Gmail account, and you're all set to go. Hit the notification so you find out when we're on, which is a lot. We're on a lot, aren't we, Joe?
We're on 5 times out of 7 during a typical week. We're usually off on Saturday. Sometimes we're on Fridays. And
Depending on if there's a storm.
This week, it looks like Friday may be a day when we maybe might go on.
I think so, because we're probably not going to go on next Sunday on Christmas Day. I got a full house of people coming, so yeah, maybe we'll do Friday. Friday will be our last show before Christmas.
You know, I'll bet you that if we were to go on Christmas morning next week at 11 o'clock, we'd have people actually watching. In fact, I would even suggest that we might have, maybe over 100, 150 people.
Do you want to test that theory? Because I actually
no,
I didn't think so.
I want to no, as far as I'm concerned, quite frankly, I would go on next Sunday at 11 o'clock, but my wife has threatened my life.
Well, I was going to say,
She said, you're not going on next Sunday on Christmas morning, and that's final.
And that's all there is to it.
My wife has green eyes, and the green eyes, when they get kind of angry, they kind of light up. And they had begun to light. It was like they were on a rheostat this morning. You know, as I was making the suggestion that we would do a Christmas Day Joe and Joe, I could see the lights in her eyes slowly but surely beginning to light up. And she said, you're not going on next Sunday morning on Christmas morning. And I said, all right, okay, fine. I got the picture. So.
Yeah. Well, in other words, Joe, what you're trying to say is if looks could kill, you would be dead for 300 years.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes,
I understand.
And she says, yes, we have people coming too. To this moment in time, I don't know who's coming. I know my daughter will probably be with us on next Sunday morning. I don't know who else is coming, but who else is coming, they're certainly welcome on Christmas Day. I have no clue who is coming and who's not coming on Christmas morning. So
I know.
We'll see.
So here we are. I'm feeling very, I don't know, mischievous this morning. I'm just kind of mischievous, and I don't know what will set off my mischievery, but we'll find out. Keith James II brings up an interesting point here. And for those of you who are regulars, you understand this, okay? Those of you who are new may not understand it, but we're a weather channel here. We do day-to-day weather. We really don't concern ourselves with other stuff. We certainly don't concern ourselves, Tom Contino, with the political stuff. Uh, that's a dig at someone on the chat board. So, and we also talk to, and this is really important, we talk to a broad audience that is not just where you happen to be or where I happen to be or, you know, or anybody on the chat board happens to be. We talk to a very broad audience that's over a very large geography. Last I checked, Joe, we are still getting people watching us from the Isle of Man, off of Great Britain. But my point is, um, when you're listening to this show, please understand that or you're watching the show. We speak much of the time. If we're speaking in a broad context. Just because you're not getting what you want to get, and I'm referring so specifically to snow lovers, just because you're not getting what you're wanting to get doesn't mean that the system that's coming into the eastern part of the United States is not a major storm. It is a major storm. This is going to be a big deal for a whole host of reasons. For some people, it's going to be snow. For some people, it's going to be wind and rain, and maybe some pretty strong winds. And for some other people, it's going to be just the bitter cold. And for some, it's going to be all of the above. So just bear that in mind. That because I got really worked up over somebody's left a comment on one of our videos, Joe, that, one of these sort of armchair folks that thinks that they know everything, and that our 86 years of combined experience means nothing. So that's where that stems from. But Keith James brings up, why did so many people fall for the model hype of snow 1 week out? Haven't we learned our lessons every single year with this model inaccuracies 7 to 10 days out? And I think the answer to that question is because that's what most people are doing on social media platforms. They grab a snow map, they grab a surface map, they put it up. It's 7 or more days out, and then they put on there, it's not a forecast, which I always say, well, if it's not a forecast, why are you putting it out to begin with? All right. That goes back to what I said at the beginning, Joe. We're a weather channel. We're a weather forecasting channel. We get into the analysis. We get into the gears and how things work. And hopefully folks come to an understanding as to why, as to why the biting the bait of 7 days out for some places what, Keith, honestly, that's going to happen. That happens all the time. It's going to continue to happen all the time. Nothing is going to stop those people from putting their hands on top of a hot stove and getting it burned. Okay. The normal reaction to that is, I ain't putting my hand on that hot stove again. Wait till the next one. That hand will be back on the hot stove. Am I right now, Mr. Rayo? Am I correct?
Well, I don't know if you saw on my Facebook page yesterday, I had issued at 5 o'clock in the afternoon a special weather statement. And actually, somebody chided me. A couple of years ago, I did this, and he said, you really ought to put Joe Rayo weather, because you don't want to make it look like this statement was issued by the National Weather Service. And I understand that, and I did put that, Joe Rayo weather. And I said, weather outlook for this week, a white Christmas, looks more like rain, dear. And you had no idea the amount of people who were, aggravated with what I had written in that statement, stating that we were looking at more rain than anything else coming in, maybe mixed with a little snow at the beginning, later Thursday of this week. Rain, showers, temperatures maybe rising into the 50s on Friday, and then a sharp cold front coming through, cutting the temperatures down rapidly. The rain may change to snow, but for a few hours only, and probably not enough for a major or significant accumulation. And then just cold and dry for Christmas Eve and Christmas. And you have no idea all the comments that I got. Somebody named Michael Gold, for example, saying, so the westward shift on the GFS was too good to be true, almost had a classic track. Another guy saying, maybe I should go swimming outside on Friday before Christmas since it'll be that warm. And another guy saying, I guess you have no, he said, we haven't had a snowy December around here in a very long time. That got me angry, Joe. that comment right there. I wrote back to this guy and I said, I guess you have short-term memory. It was just 2 years ago, 2020, that the tri-state area was hit by about a foot of snow on December 15th. The same storm dropped the record 40 inches in Binghamton, New York. No, we haven't had a snowy December in a very long time, only 2 years ago. And
Oh, Joe, you preach it to the choir here. I get so aggravated with that sort of stuff. The things that people say, it's not only it's short-term memory driven by a 5-year-old mentality. I'm going to be really mean about this, but it's true. It's driven by a 5-year-old mentality because they haven't gotten their Ziploc bag filled with Skittles. They get so worked up and so upset, and they really say stupid stuff. They just say dumb things. People.
Here's the dumbest of all on my list of complaints yesterday. I mean, I'd say 8 out of 10 people were really angry because they were really preparing for a major
I got one of those. Go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
There was a guy this morning on CBS News Sunday morning. By the way, the greatest television show that you will find during the course of a typical week is CBS Sunday morning, 9 o'clock to 10:30, hosted by Jane Pauley. And I think it was Jim Gaffigan, their resident commentator and comedian. They played Andy Williams. It's the most wonderful time of the year.
Right.
And he said, wonderful? You call this time wonderful with the traffic jams? And then he particularly emphasized the cold, the snow, the airports canceling flights or whatever. But people, apparently, this is what people wanted. They wanted cold and snow and cancellations of flights and people getting stuck outside or whatever like that, based upon what I had just written up yesterday afternoon. But one person, which really got me angry, not going to mention the name, but wrote, they effed up our weather, and with the F, the whole expletive was on my Facebook page. They effed up our weather pattern 12 years ago. It's a disgrace. Our new pattern is precipitation heading our way, blank, 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 blank. Thermometer heads to 45 and above, always taunting the threat of snow, but never producing. It's time to move. And to that, I wrote, I don't understand your comment. Exactly who is they? If you like snow, you'll be interested to know that going back to the winter of 2010, again, this person went back, they said they effed up the pattern 12 years ago, and I still don't know who they is. I said, if you like snow, you'll be interested to know that going back to the winter of 2010 up to the present time, snowfalls in December have averaged above normal, no fewer than 6 times. 2 Decembers ago, we saw more than 5 times the normal complement of snow. In 2010, the year that supposedly we started effing up the pattern, 10 times the normal amount of snow for a typical December. I said, now, if you're frustrated over the lack of snow so far this month, I'm sorry, but that's the way things sometimes go. And then I ended with, and incidentally, if you use an expletive again when posting a comment on my page, I will delete it and have you blocked. I haven't heard from that person since.
Well, you won't. You seldom, if ever, hear a response from that sort of stuff.
Followed by a bunch of other people saying "boo" and "very sad" and "well, that's."
Joe, I think Joe, we should reveal. I think we should finally be honest about things and reveal that you and I are the they. We sit here. We've got our little weather modification, boxes with the dials, just like and we're working it on an old-fashioned 1970s television with knobs to turn and no remotes and little antennas sticking up and making those sounds. Joe and I are modifying the weather even as we speak.
And I mean, on the chat board right now, we have a gentleman. I don't recall seeing the name before. Louis Orizio saying, "Well, it looks like there's a potential similarity between Friday's upcoming storm and front to the Christmas."
No, there's no similarity, Lou. No, not this time. No similarity. There really isn't. Okay, and I'm going to get into what's going on. But look, just going back real quick to the whole thing about 7 day, whoever it was said something to the effect of prepping for a storm 7 days ahead of time. I mean, who buys milk 7 days ahead of time from come on, really? And if you buy eggs, the expiration on most eggs is 6 weeks. It's not like they're not going to get used. And as for bread, uh, you know, freeze it. I don't know what to tell you. If it certainly if you're watching this show and somebody apparently left me a similar comment on my show. If you're watching this show from last week when we had on Bill Goodman and we talked about the meteorology behind everything that was going on and what could or couldn't happen. We covered all the bases, which is what you really should do when you're 7 or 8 days out as you're seeing everything evolve. If you came away from that you should somehow go out and buy a deep freeze and just stock yourself up because you're never going to see the light of day again. That's your mind. That's your problem. That's your mindset. You obviously you've got you hear what you want to hear. All right, pay attention to when we're talking, because and not listen to every other word. What can I say? Enough. I just had I had one of those moments over the weekend because some of the comments they were so childish and so annoying and so off point and so not applicable to this show that I just I just waved my hand and
Da
that's the
da
end of
da
it.
da da da.
Duh.
Da.
Okay, so let's get started here with what's going on. By the way, after that rant, if you could take us to 100 likes, folks, that would be nice. Because Joe and I like it when we get nice. We're less we're not
Curmudgeonly.
curmudgeonry, yeah, whatever it is. When we get to 100 likes. So let us start this morning, opening up with the morning U.S. satellite loop, and it looks rather innocuous. There's not a whole lot really happening across the country at the moment. We've got a few little things here and there, but on the whole, things are pretty quiet. Still getting a lot of excuse me, clouds and snow showers and a little bit of lake effect in the Northeast, Mr. Rayo. But on the whole, at least through Wednesday, it looks like a quiet start to the week here along the East Coast. But by the time we get to the middle part of next week, we're going to start to see the systems that now you can't really see it up off the Pacific Northwest coast on the satellite. That's going to come inland and start the ball rolling to what we're going to have at the end of the week.
Right. And yeah, and I would have thought that a lot of people would have actually been happy in hearing that it was going to moderate and warm up, and there would be more in the way of rain as opposed to snow, let's say by Thursday or Friday, because a lot of people still are trying to finish their Christmas or holiday shopping, and the first 3 days of this week we're going to have fair skies, albeit it will be a bit on the cold side, but no weather problems to speak of. Thursday, well, the first half of the day should be okay, but then things start changing later in the day. But I would have thought, the last thing you would want is major atrocities in terms of, potential heavy snow or frigid cold weather. And apparently I was wrong. Apparently people want all of that for this week. So
Well, and you know what, you bring up a really important point. We're a week before Christmas. With Christmas on a Sunday, that means that uh, a lot of the traveling that's going to be going on is going to pile on at the end of this week, and you're going to have a storm. You're going to have a major storm that's going to impact St. Louis, Indianapolis, Chicago, Detroit, Cleveland, to name a few of the major cities, and then we could, run a whole host of minor cities in that beltway, and that'll be for snow. But you're also going to affect air travel and road travel up in Boston, New York, Philadelphia, Washington D.C., Baltimore, because of rain and wind. And you're also going to impact weather across the deep south because a lot of that cold is going to be coming to me in North Georgia, for example, and that's going to create huge issues for southern areas. So yeah, this I get the weather part of it, and those of you who are into weather, I totally understand. You know, the energy that you express in weather and how it develops. But let's bear in mind this is a big deal for a lot of people this week that need to get to other places so they can be with their families, which at the end of the day is the most important thing. Okay,
Right.
I've ended my philosophical moral
Rant.
lecture of the day.
Yes. All right of it.
So let's check out the radar this morning, and it's you know, I don't know. It looks like somebody took a paintbrush and just kind of waved it toward a wall, and you got these splotches here and there. Up in Maine, it looks like there's some pretty decent lake effect though going on up in north central New York, north of Syracuse, around Pulaski, Watertown, Redfield, and all those wonderful places there that measure the snow in megafeet. Also in southwestern New York, seeing some lake effect snows there and other patches of snow showers in and around Michigan and down into Ohio and even into parts of West Virginia, seeing a little bit of snow there. Some action going on up in the northern plains, some moisture coming into the Pacific Northwest, and we've even got some action down in the southwest, while the rest of the country is on the quiet side. Uh, I'm going to wonder, one of the things I'm going to think about, just speaking of lake effect, Joe, is this storm's probably going to produce a lot of lake effect snow after the low center goes by.
Right, but unlike the last big outbreak of lake effect, which hit the Buffalo area, chiefly because the winds were west southwest. I think this coming lake effect scenario will be more out of a north or northwesterly direction, which means that places like, let's say, Rochester will be seeing more of a lake effect pattern as opposed to, or maybe even Syracuse, because the winds would have to come down through the Finger Lakes to affect them. So it's not going to be the same as it was a month ago. But yeah, it certainly looks like there's going to be quite a bit of lake effect snow, heavy snow that's going to be falling with this system by this weekend. So folks who live up near the Great Lakes, you may get your wish of a white Christmas, even though you may not want it.
Well, let's look at what WPC has to say. And here are the 7-day rainfall totals, Joe, which are actually rather impressive on their forecast anyway. But much of the area from Virginia to Maine gets 2 to 3 inches of liquid, particularly in parts of eastern Pennsylvania, New Jersey, northern New Jersey, the Hudson Valley, southern New England, all in those patches of red and almost orange-ish. And also extending down along the southeast coast, and sizable rainfalls of a half inch to an inch, running up and down the Ohio Valley and into the southeast and along the Gulf states. And you can see also a lot of heavy action up in the Pacific Northwest. Meanwhile, as far as snow is concerned, so we've got the probability for at least two. And much of what you see in the Northeast is because of what this is actually taking us through Wednesday morning. So this is all before anything happens with that storm. We are seeing up in northern Maine, fairly high probability of at least two, also in and around the lakes. High probability in the northern part of the lakes of at least two, 50% or higher in the blue. And in the west, we are seeing high probabilities up in the northwest, and that is with the system that is coming inland. Now, I'm waiting, usually around this time, WPC updates the long range snowfall outlook, which usually they do it at around between 9 and 11 a.m., but maybe because it's Sunday, they don't do it. So it hasn't been updated yet. So this is left over from midnight last night, which means that they certainly didn't absorb any of the overnight guidance. But this is for Wednesday into Thursday, 7 a.m. to 7 a.m. And you see where the probabilities are setting up. From Kansas to Missouri to Wisconsin to Minnesota, back to South Dakota to the Upper Peninsula of Michigan, 10 to 30% in the light green of at least, let's call it at least three, and 30 to 50 in the darker green. Also seeing a few patches of 10 to 30 setting up in southern Virginia. So now let's go to Thursday into Friday, and we have uh, uh, The southern flank of 10 to 30% is well northwest of Boston, touches New York City, just northwest of Philadelphia, just northwest of Washington, D.C., Baltimore. Uh, I'm kind of thinking that it's probably that's going to get adjusted and pushed up a little bit more to the left or a little bit more northwest, but we'll
I
see.
agree.
We'll see what they do. Uh, we've got 30 to 50 western half of Pennsylvania, Ohio. A lot of 50 to 70 showing up, including Chicago, for example. Also, the 30 to 50 goes all the way down into western Kentucky, and of course, you notice when you got 30 to 50 showing up on the Canadian side of Lake Erie and Lake Ontario, that kind of tells you what their thinking is. And for Saturday, um, this is, I'm sorry, for Friday into Saturday, they still have the 10 to 30 kind of pushed down into the mountains of West Virginia and a narrow area of 30 to 50 that extends there too. But most of the higher probabilities are northern Pennsylvania, southern and western and northeastern New York, and then on up onto Canada. And by the way, shows you with terms of the track, the track. Here's a kind of, you can look at almost any map and figure out where the track is. But in terms of the low track, it's probably going to be something like this, because the probabilities up, for example, in Maine and New Hampshire and Vermont, to be as low as 10 to 30% kind of tells you that warm air is going to probably envelop all of New England with this storm.
You probably could put more of the emphasis. I mean, I know both the graphic that's now centered on Saturday at 12Z, and also the previous one centered on Friday at 12Z, had New York and northern New Jersey within the light green. But I think you ought to put the emphasis more on the 10 as opposed to the 30 in terms of the probability for maybe up to a quarter of an inch of measurable precipitation, because I honestly think that while we're going to probably see a changeover, a very rapid changeover, sometime Friday evening, late Friday or Friday night, from rain to snow, it's only going to last for a few hours. I mean, the winds will turn right into the northwest, and that's going to not only turn it colder, but also turn it drier. And I honestly don't think we're going to see very much in the way of any significant accumulation. It'll look pretty. It'll be a cheap thrill for all of the snow lovers out there who want a white Christmas. You could look out on the night before Christmas Eve, maybe, and see the snow coming down and say, "Oh, look, it's snowing." But if you're hoping for a good old-fashioned white Christmas with, more than a few inches on the ground for Christmas morning, that really doesn't look like it's going to happen. Somebody asked me about it. Will we have a flash freeze? I'm not sure if that's going to happen either. For a flash freeze, you'd have to have what we had, as we were describing back on Thursday, with temperatures plummeting rapidly within a few hours. But it is going to turn sharply colder right after the front goes by. By the end of Friday or Friday night. So I'm not sure how much you want to, attach to the fact that we're in that light green here in the immediate New York area. Certainly, Long Island is not.
Right.
But that should give you a clue that, again, it's probably a lot closer to a 10% probability as opposed to a 30 or.
I think the only way it happens is, you've got this really deep upper low that's going to be moving across Pennsylvania with a very sharp upper trough around it when the cold air arrives. That maybe if the trough is sharp enough, you get a narrow line of, maybe a narrow line of heavy precip or heavy snow.
I was thinking about that, Jody.
Yeah,
I mean, maybe a snow squall
yeah.
line, possibly.
I think that's the only way where, if you get the cold air to come in a rush, and so, at least enough to take the temperatures down below freezing, which I think you might have a better chance the further inland you are. But if you do that, and there's, the upper trough is pretty sharp, and the upper low is very deep, so maybe there'll be a stick on the radar of snow squalls that comes in and whitens the ground, or in some places maybe leaves a coating to an inch, or possibly even two if you're, say, in Northeast PA, or if you're, even, or even northeast of there, going up in the Catskills and so on. Maybe that's the one thing that could happen out of this. But you know what? I'm not going to sit here on Sunday and start wasting energy trying to forecast. That's a Thursday question this week. As
Right.
far and we'll deal with it then. I've got the upper air up. I just want to show everybody. Everybody gets worked up over certain specifics, whether it be, oh, we got a block. Oh my God, we got a block. Isn't that great? And I've said this 100 times. I'm going to say it again. Be careful what you wish for, because you may get it and you may not like the outcome. And this is one of those instances. And there is a number of different ways that you wouldn't like the outcome. Just because you have a block is no way a guarantee, because you don't know where the troughs and ridges are going to stay set up. And in this particular case, the trough axis is at 90 west. It's not at 80 or even 85. It's at 90. Okay. So that's what happened this time around with this block. So let me just show you, though, in terms of the upper air, because I want to just kind of touch on, Joe, the models and what they were doing back last week in the long range, and what went, let's call it, what went wrong. No question, it's a blocky look here. And we're looking at the upper air. I moved it forward, so just to go back, this is what it looks like right now, with an upper low. The old upper low, the Plains Blizzard upper low, is finally moving. It's northeast of Lake Huron today. That's why you're getting all that lake effect stuff going on. That moves to the east, okay, and heads pretty quickly to Newfoundland. We're now into early Tuesday morning. The block is still there. So I'll just draw a little bit there. Here's your blocking high in the upper atmosphere. Still there, pushing from Greenland into Labrador. And on the upper left, you can see what I've just drawn in, an upper low. That actually is a troughiness that extends all the way west back to the Pacific Northwest coast. So here we are. We're now into Wednesday. And you see there is an upper low sitting in James Bay. Okay. And if you look to the west, you could just kind of begin to see the trough that's in the Pacific, that's coming into the Pacific Northwest. It's going to dive down. Now, what the models did was they took this upper low and pushed it and moved it to the east toward Labrador and Newfoundland. That would have forced this upper trough to dive pretty far to the south and then make the turn as it went up the eastern seaboard. But instead, what's happening is that upper low is lifting northward. Okay, see that? Watch the upper low there. That's north of Minnesota.
Right.
That closed circle lifts northward instead of going eastward. But if it had gone eastward, it would have kept the ridge in the east pretty flat. Instead, it not only causes ridging to occur along the east coast, but the diving trough, if you look at this, Joe, it's never a good thing when the trough is, I mean, this is a powerhouse trough, make no mistake. But and it dives pretty far to the south, but when it's already negatively tilted and it's only at the Mississippi River, you're not going to get a storm taking a coastal track. You're going to take a storm that's going to take an inland track. And that's exactly what's happening here.
Right.
And honestly, I think the models actually did a real. Here we are. Yesterday, and I was kind of thinking I'd probably wait till Monday to figure this out. But there was no doubt in my mind when I looked at the stuff yesterday afternoon in terms of the guidance that this is locked in, and the models actually, when you look at it, performed really well here. Particularly the GFS, not so much because it was still kind of hanging on to something maybe offshore, but the European and the Icon and the Canadian locked on to this late last week. Okay, the GFS was the only holdout here, and they locked on early to the idea that upper low was not going to go east from James Bay into Labrador and hold the ridge down, but was going to lift northward, and then it forces the trough to go deep and negative right at 90 degrees west, which is, you got something like this, your storm track is going to be that way. It ain't going to be this way. That's a big XXX for going east. And that really is what it boils down to.
I'm the more I look at this, I know that on Thursday I had brought up the 1976 analog, in which we had a sharp Arctic front coalesce with a coastal storm that was moving along the Atlantic seaboard. And when the cold air got drawn into the coastal storm, it blew up into a major system. Well, there's no coastal storm now. I
Right.
mean, and so that's a big player in what we were talking about on Thursday. But now, in looking more closely at it, and you just brought to mind, Joe, the mention of possibly a stick, if you will, of snow or a band of snow moving through. I'm thinking now that, all right, we don't have the coastal storm, but we do have the sharp front. Maybe this might actually be something somewhat resembling, although, again, at the onset, I said that Buffalo needs southwesterly winds, and I think this is going to be a northwest pattern, but somewhat resembling the situation in late January of 77, where we did have a push of very cold air with a cold front, and we did have snow squalls moving across parts of eastern New York. That was the same system that did bring all that heavy snow to Buffalo. But again, I don't have the map in front of me. I don't have the map in my mind as to how winds came from a west or southwest direction.
Well,
With that,
I think if you want that to, if that's going to occur, and I just rolled the GFS out to Saturday, okay, with the low that's going northeast and is pretty much going east of James Bay as a 960 low. I think you would need to probably have that low go west of James Bay so that you could have a southwest wind because most of the isobars are northwest. Now, on the other hand, okay, that does mean that there probably will be significant lake effect coming in off of Lake Erie and Lake Ontario on the northwest wind into parts of northeastern Ohio and northwest Pennsylvania, but perhaps in a different sort of way. It's not the long fetch; it's a shorter fetch, so perhaps it'll be some lake effect, but not crazy lake effect. But you're going to need the low to go a little bit more to the left to get that west-southwest wind to set that off. And I don't know that you're going to have that. And also the other thing is this thing is moving along, so maybe even if you did get the lake effect for a day or so, it will by the time we get to Christmas Day, it really starts to shut down.
yeah. And then speaking of the potential of maybe snow squall activity, the National Weather Service, I don't see it mentioned very often nowadays. But I think that when they start considering possible squally weather in front of a wintertime cold front, they had something called the buff kit. Remember that, Joe?
Yeah, I think
And
it's the buff kits are still lurking around somewhere
yeah,
where you
so
can access it.
but don't be surprised if, let's say, beginning Wednesday, too early now. It's Sunday, but if on Wednesday or Thursday they start talking about the possibility of squalls with the advance of that cold front, because it is certainly a very potent cold front. It is going to be, again, the one thing that is missing for all of you snow lovers that we were thinking about back on Thursday is there's no coastal storm for that front to lock onto. So now we're just going to have to rely on the front itself. And the front, as it approaches, certainly I think will push temperatures well up into the 40s, even into the 50s, with a likelihood of rain, showery type rains. And then it'll be interesting to see what happens when. And by the way, also, the two models, the GFS and the European, are different. Um, Joe, my Renata was, the last two nights, I've gotten up like at 3 o'clock in the morning, and I come back to bed, and Renata says, "Where have you been? What are you doing out there?" Because I was awake for like 5 or 10 minutes, and I said, "Well, I just wanted to look at the European." I mean, I wanted
Once
to see
upon
the
a, Joe, I'm just thinking, once upon a time when in a younger day, you'd be waking up at 3 o'clock in the morning, and let's just say if you were you wouldn't be looking at models. Let's put it that way.
well,
Those
I'm
days.
3 o'clock in the morning. I just wanted to see. I've noticed in the overnight model, the 0Z models, the last couple of nights, that the GFS and the European are different in terms of the timing. The timing on one is the GFS is a bit faster excuse me, the European is a bit faster than the GFS. The European, if you want to believe it, brings the front through, let's say, at the end of the day on Friday, and drops the temperature sharply. The GFS has been bringing it through like at 1 o'clock in the morning, Friday night, Saturday morning. So there is a difference. But again, we're looking at models, guidance, and solutions 5 to 6 days out. Lots
Right.
of things are going to happen lots of changes are going to happen
Well,
between
the,
now
w-
and
the
then.
the one interesting thing with this, if there is one interesting thing, is that there is a lead low. If you look if you look on I got the European up now. By the way, just as a reminder, this is not showing precipitation type. It just shows how much precip falls. But there's a low that forms in the Gulf of Mexico on Monday that kind of moves off the Florida coast, sets up an inverted trough along the southeast coast of the United States, right in here. There's a high, there's a surface high that's built up in Quebec, and of course you see the energy that's piling on with the diver to the west that's going to be the major storm. So we're going to have this weaker system lift up the coast. And the European does have, Joe, maybe because it's faster, is the snow lovers could get a cheap thrill here, even at the coast, that there might be some snow at the start because it does have the 540 thickness across central New Jersey with precipitation here sometime between 7 a.m. and 10 a.m. on Thursday. And it takes a little while for that 540, the 546 is in central New Jersey at 1 o'clock in the afternoon. And of course, after that, it's gone. But my point is the faster European might argue for a cheap thrill and maybe more snow well inland north and west, because after that goes by, then you got the warm front from the deepening low, which is also left of the other models. It takes it into southeastern Michigan. So it almost looks like a giant warm front going by
Right.
for Thursday night. Then we get the south southwest wind that becomes pretty strong as we go through the day. You're right. The front is on the coast in the afternoon, and then is there going to be a stick after that, a stick of precip after that? And I'm just looking in terms of the lake effect stuff going on for Saturday in western and northern New York. Yeah, I mean it'll do that and then kind of sort of wind down. Although there's still some lagging through the weekend on the European, because the European actually, Joe, what the European does is it takes the low to James Bay on the east side and then does a counterclockwise loop. So that buys it a little more time with the west southwest flow. So maybe if you use the European as your guide, the lake effect might be a bigger issue in parts of western New York and northwestern Pennsylvania, northeast Ohio for going into the weekend.
It's possible, or as Muskie used to say on Deputy Dog, it's possible. It's
Yeah.
possible.
Oh, and by the way, let's not forget too. Yeah, let's not forget too. The cold, because the core of this cold air is going more south than it is going east. And look at these anomalies. I mean, they're just crazy. Uh, uh, Although eventually it does get into the east, and the European actually is a little colder than the GFS when it comes to temperatures here. But that cold push, if you watch the push of below normal temperatures behind this, the greatest anomalies are in the Ohio Valley down into the deep south, where we're talking temperatures running 20 to 30 degrees below average for this time of year.
Right, and it seems like the extreme cold doesn't quite make it into the Northeast. It seems like there's a concentration of extreme cold from about the lower Great Lakes all the way south to the Gulf Coast. But then as you move north and east, while it's cold, no question about it, it is quite cold, the extreme cold begins to modify some as you move, let's say, into eastern Pennsylvania, then eastern New York. And by the time you get to central and northern New England, it's only it's only cold. It's not anything that you would write home about. So there's a lot of concentration in that cold weather that's going to literally plunge all the way down right into your neck of the woods, Joe, from the northern and central portions of Canada right down into where you are
Yeah,
as we move into Christmas week.
I may see a little bit of snow out of this.
Yeah, wouldn't it be so funny if you ended up with some oddity and you ended up with like 5 or 6 inches of
Well,
snow?
you know what? With the upper trough, if the thing is, the upper trough, what I've learned here is that the upper trough has to extend far enough south. When we looked at the initial runs where it was taking a primary low into Tennessee or Kentucky, uh, or in some cases even further south. It had on one of the colder runs last week. It had the primary down on the Florida Panhandle, and then arcing up up the east side of the Appalachians. I kind of need that upper trough to extend pretty far to the south, and that's when especially because of the mountains here, you get stuff that develops that's localized. I guess I would call it mountain effect, with some lift depending on the wind direction. So yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if there some of the mountains here in northeast Georgia and in western North Carolina wind up with at least a few inches out of this. I'm just looking at the European on pivotal weather. Yeah, you can kind of see this. This is also precip rate rather than radar, and you can see at least where the model is with this lead low or the warm front, however you want to describe it, has some heavier snows in north central PA and some frozen and freezing precip into northern New Jersey, and then over into the Hudson Valley. Actually gives a fair amount of snow to the middle and upper Hudson Valley and into Vermont and New Hampshire. And then, of course, that lifts out. And then you got the cold front that comes through. Joe, the other thing is the surge of rain for Thursday that comes up, that surge goes out, and you actually may spend a good part of Friday not doing very much until the front gets close. If you look at
Right.
let me get the close-up view here, because I think the European would argue that for the stick idea. Let me get the regional, get a little closer. We could take a look, a better look. So, okay, I'm going off the 0Z run because that actually takes us through the time frame as opposed to the 6Z, which only goes out 90 hours. But let's see. So running it along, we're now approaching midweek, and there
And
you
what
see
mind
it.
you, and you know, a lot of people I know for Christmas Eve or Christmas Day were dreaming about we had up here in the Hudson Valley in 2002, where it was an all-out snowstorm for much of the afternoon and evening. I know a lot of you are thinking that and hoping for that, but what's wrong with having as Joe has been referring it to, a stick? What's wrong with having with the front moving through and having an hour or two of intense snow squally type
Yeah,
activity, which may put down not a whole heck of a lot of snow, but whiten the ground so that when you wake up on Christmas Eve, there it is. I mean, that's probably going to be your best shot, is to maybe get a.
it's
And
going
that's
to be
why I
your.
say,
It's
and
going to
that's why I
be.
say it's not going to be. It's not going to be. You're not going to hear anybody at the weather services, either in New York or Philadelphia or Albany or whatever. They're not going to talk about this now. But when we get to Wednesday and Thursday, especially, if they use those who still use the buff kit, which helps them to define, really significant instability or whatever. That's when you're going to start hearing maybe the talk about, oh, maybe a squall or two, and then that's when we start, getting excited. What could be more exciting, Joe, than, let's say, on Friday night, having your phone go off with snow squall warning, snow squall
Yeah.
warning.
They'll be glued to the window.
Yes,
Now
exactly.
looking at the snow again with this warm front, let's call it a warm front that comes up for Thursday. It actually does produce some decent snows in parts of southwest PA in the mountains, and also through up the middle and Hudson, for the Catskills on northward through upstate New York. It's got a pretty large area of six. I mean, and I'm using the European here, snowfall forecast map from Pivotal Weather. I mean, it's producing some 6-inch plus amounts there. If the European is right in terms of the speed, that it comes in faster, then it's good. There's going to be some cold air in upstate New York. There's going to be some cold air up in central and northern New England to produce a fast front end thumping of snow on the order of, let's just say, to be conservative, let's go 3 to 6 for those areas, well north of 84, Route 84, and up in northern Maine, we'll get some of that as well. And then of course is the question of whether there's the stick or not. And I showed you on the radar the surface map presentation just a little bit ago that yeah, maybe there's a shot for it. Now, just really quick, because we're coming up on noontime on a Sunday filled with football. Just want to show you here. We'll go with the GFS long range, because at the end of the day, does it really matter which model we use for the long range? There's so much variability. The new one's coming out, so I'm just going to go back to the 0Z from last night. You've got you're starting off here with the trough in the east. You still have higher than normal pressures up in the North Atlantic. The trough in the east, kind of just seeing the time frame here. So this is next Tuesday. The model's swinging some sort of trough coming down from Canada on Monday and Tuesday of next week. With where only it really reflects a weak system. But over the course of next week, it looks like the pattern kind of calms down a bit, and troughing sort of shifts in the west at least for a short period of time. It does want to start to shift that trough maybe more to the east later on. So there's a bit of a break here. Things may calm down for a bit. We'll see how they play out. But there's not going to be a whole lot of cold air around once this shot of cold air plays through.
And Leon Probitsky, thank you very much for hitting Super Chat today. I'm just winding back to see if there were any other Super Chat hits this morning. I think Leon is the solitary one and only for today, but we thank him as always for that. And Joe, you're right. We have a lot of football today. In fact, your Giants have a very big game against Washington. If they expect to go,
well, they better not tie again. Let's put it that way. They better not tie. That what was it, a 2020 or 2020 tie or 22-22, whatever it was.
Whatever it was.
Somebody needs to win. They need to win the game outright to have any chance of making the playoffs. So we'll see. You can see I'm kind of dressed for it.
Yes, I can. I love the scarf.
Yeah, isn't this scarf cool? My friend Duke gave this to me. He gave me a scarf, and I don't know if you can see it, but yeah. So I was at a Christmas party last night, so he gave me a Giants cap from 2011. So I was very happy. It was a nice thought, and thanks, Duke. Most appreciated. Oh, and by the way, I don't know if you can see. I'm going to lean over to the side. If you can look at my Christmas tree at the very top, the Lionel Train engineers caps have arrived for my grandsons.
They are going to be so happy when they visit Grandpa's house.
Oh yeah, they got new tracks that are under the Christmas tree, and they got some other things for them. Let me put it this way: Pop gets to give him all the fun stuff. and I have to tell you, in an age, this is very serious, because one day you're going to have grandkids. Okay, am I right?
I hope so.
Yeah, one day you're going to have grandchildren, and in all seriousness, when those of us who are of our age, okay, one of the bigger frustrations that you see among kids is the fact that they're all on this, okay? They're all on their phones, okay? You could be in a room full of people, and they're talking, they just playing on their phones, or even playing games on computer screens. And I get the game thing. Excuse me, I don't really play them. They're not for me. But you can get rather involved. But the wonderful thing about trains, Joe, and my grandsons are seeing this now, because my daughter when I got the train sets for them, I got them 2 sets over the course of 2 years. She said, "What are you getting them train sets for? I don't have the room, et cetera, et cetera." And now they have the room because they built a bonus room. But here's where this is going. The boys now love their train sets. They spend the entire, they will spend hours playing with their train sets. as opposed to being in front of a screen. And you know what? You can hear them. They're using their imaginations. They're creating these, sort of fantasy things with the trains pulling into stations. When you get them, the houses and the town, and they have to build the town. That all inspires the brain to start functioning in ways that for things in the longer term, like engineering and mathematics and problem solving. This is it's inspiring for them to get them the kinds of things that get their head going, get them to really create. Because I don't think this really helps people to be creative. Not in a social sort of way,
So you're
in
not
my
going to,
opinion.
with the train sets, you're not going to try to pull a Gomez Adams and blow part of the track up, are
No,
you?
you know what? That thought. No, 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 no. Although if it was just me, that would be, you know, those were cool. Those were great. I loved it on
I
the Addams
remember,
Family when they showed the Lionel trains crashing.
I remember, as a very young boy, and when I talk about that, I talk about when I'm 5, 6, 7, we had trains going around the Christmas tree, and the trains I remember, I mean, they look like the kind you'd see on the LIRR. They were illuminated from within, and on the windows there were the silhouettes of people, and so when the train went around the inside, the light lit up on the inside, and so it looked like you could see actually people who were on on the train looking out the window. I remember that so very well. But that goes back, oh my goodness, uh 6 decades.
Yes, it
And back
does.
and back then, the average kid, the kids today that said, "What do you want for Christmas?" "Oh, I want an Apple 14 iPhone or whatever like that." Back then, I remember at least at Christmas time, you ask a kid, what did you want?" And that kid would probably say a Duncan yo-yo. I honestly
Oh
remember
yeah. Uh,
that was a big seller for toys
oh,
back
I remember that.
back
Yeah.
then. If it isn't Duncan, it isn't yo-yo. I mean, that's what the kids. It was a kinder, gentler era back then, and today, of course, kids are far too more sophisticated than back in the day or whatever like that. But trains are neat. We sometimes we'll see advertised in the local newspaper these places where you're invited down to see this giant city, so to speak, and you actually see grown men wearing railroad caps or whatever like that, so proud, and especially the guy who's up at the front with all the controls and he's moving the trains all the way around. But not just the trains, but I mean, even you have people like chopping wood and lights flickering and light. So yeah, it's great to see that especially at this time of the year.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I'm part of a bunch of train groups on Facebook, and I'm amazed. It's amazing how creative people are in building whole replicas of this, for example, the New York City subway system, or the L with the L's. I mean, the detail is just astounding. It's just absolutely astounding, and how much work that people put into creating these miniaturized versions of life, which is what they are, and reflections of life, which is what they are. So, anyway, think about the fact that when your grandkids come, you start them off uh,
Trains.
with trains. Okay. So anyhow, on that particular note, it is 12 noon. Right now, here in northeast Georgia, in the mountains of Blairsville, it is 32 degrees with a rather gusty northwest wind, and I have to go take my doggy for a walkie in the parky and come back and watch some football. So have a great day, Mr. Rayo. Everybody on the chat board, thanks for being here and taking part in the lively conversation that we do here on a day-to-day basis. 134 likes. And we had a nice sized audience for a Sunday morning. So we will see you tomorrow night at 7:30 Eastern Time. 7:35. I'm sorry, 7:35 p.m. Eastern Time.
We shall be here. Have fun, everybody, on your Sunday, and What else can I say except the reservoir?
Yep, and one last thing. The Joe and Joe Weather Show is brought to you by Omni True Value Hardware at 1226 North Wellwood Avenue in West Babylon, New York. Your go-to place this winter to make sure you get everything you need to make sure your home or business is clear and free of any snow and ice. 631-756-1125 is the phone number, and the website is omnitruevalue.com. We'll see you tomorrow.